Most men chase approval. They flatter, they bend, they shrink themselves, hoping to be liked. But here's the brutal truth. You are only as attractive as your level of self-respect. A man who needs nothing is powerful. A man who knows who he is and who he isn't commands attention without demanding it. You don't need better lines, you don't need tricks, you need a spine, you need clarity. She doesn't want a puppet, she wants presence, she wants certainty, not arrogance, but quiet confidence rooted in discipline and purpose. Most men are loud to be noticed. The rare man is silent, but still felt. He walks into a room and doesn't try to take space. Space just moves around him. You don't win her by chasing her, you win her by chasing your mission. Because a man with a mission becomes magnetic. He stops seeking permission to live. And in doing so, he becomes unforgettable. This brutal truth, it hurts at first, but if you live by it, you'll never need to convince a woman to want you. Self-respect is the foundation of true attractiveness because it signals to the world that you hold yourself to a standard that cannot be negotiated. When a man respects himself, it shows in how he walks, how he speaks, and how he carries himself when no one is watching. It's not about having an inflated ego or pretending to be something you're not. It's about knowing your value so deeply that you refuse to lower your standards for attention, affection, or approval. Women can sense this immediately. It's not a conscious decision on their part, it's instinctual. Just like you can feel when someone is desperate, you can also feel when someone is anchored, grounded, and at peace with who they are. That kind of man doesn't seek validation. He doesn't need to be liked. He's already accepted himself fully. When you operate from a place of self-respect, you naturally stop tolerating disrespect, manipulation, and inconsistency. You don't have to fight for it. It becomes your natural boundary. And this boundary doesn't just protect you, it attracts people who operate at a similar level. You begin to draw in women who admire strength, clarity, and consistency. They are drawn not to the external features, your clothes, your car, your job title, but to the energy you carry. That energy comes from the silent understanding that you are not for sale. You don't change who you are to be accepted. You don't fold under pressure just to gain favor. You stay firm, and firmness is rare. That's why it's so attractive. A man with self-respect won't beg, chase, or plead for attention. If a woman is inconsistent, cold, or disrespectful, he walks. Not to play games, but because he simply doesn't allow chaos into his life. This is not bitterness, it's discipline. It's the understanding that you teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. And when you tolerate less, you get more. Women are drawn to men who are available to anyone. They are drawn to men who have standards. A man who says no. A man who has boundaries. A man who doesn't bend to every smile or compliment. That man is intriguing. He's mysterious not because he hides, but because he doesn't overexpose himself. He knows his worth, so he doesn't feel the need to prove it. Self-respect also brings emotional control. A man who respects himself doesn't explode in anger when rejected or ghosted. He doesn't spiral. He lets go quickly and moves forward. That emotional strength is magnetic. It makes a woman feel safe, not because you protect her from the world, but because you've already mastered yourself. And when you master yourself, everything around you starts to align. Attractiveness isn't built in the gym mirror in the size of your bank account. It's built in the quiet decisions you make every day to not text back, to not chase, to not settle, to not explain yourself to someone who doesn't even see your value. That's where it begins. And the man who lives from this place consistently, not just in moments of confidence, becomes the kind of man 95.7% of women find irresistible. Because self-respect isn't a look, it's a presence. And presence speaks louder than words. Neediness repels. Independence attracts. This is not just a catchy phrase, it's a principle that plays out in every human relationship, especially romantic ones. When a man is needy, he operates from a place of lack. He is constantly seeking something outside of himself to to feel whole. He needs validation, reassurance, attention, and approval, and when he doesn't get it, he panics. This energy is not only unattractive, it's suffocating. It pushes people away, even if they can't fully explain why. Women can sense neediness without a word being spoken. It shows up in the way you constantly text, overcompliment, or try too hard to be agreeable. It's not the actions themselves that are the problem, it's the intent behind them. When your energy says, please like me, you've already given away your power. Independence, on the other hand, creates gravity. A man who is independent doesn't need anyone to complete him. He's already fulfilled from within. His joy, his peace, and his confidence are not dependent on someone else's mood, response, or attention. He doesn't fear silence. He doesn't panic when she takes hours to respond. He doesn't build stories in his mind about being ignored or unwanted. He's stable. And that emotional stability is rare, which is why it's so attractive. It creates a sense of security and strength that women feel drawn to, even if they can't logically to explain it. It's not about being cold or detached. It's about being centered. A man who can enjoy someone without needing them exerts a quiet power that is impossible to fake. And neediness also creates a dynamic where you're constantly performing. You try to guess what she wants. You mold yourself to fit her expectations. You abandon your own voice just to keep her interested. But the more you perform, the less authentic you become. And women pick up on that. It feels forced, it feels off, and it breaks trust. Because if you're not being real with her, how can she truly connect with you? Independence solves this by removing the pressure. When you're independent, you're not worried about keeping her. You're focused on being yourself and letting things unfold naturally. You say what you mean, you speak your truth, and you let the chips fall where they may. That kind of honesty is rare, and it's deeply attractive. A man who is independent is not afraid of losing someone because he knows he'll still be whole without them. That confidence is calming. It makes you a source of strength rather than a source of stress. You become someone who adds value instead of someone who drains it, and that shift is everything. The truth is, most people are secretly tired of emotional chaos. They don't want to manage your insecurity or walk on eggshells to keep you happy. They want someone who is grounded, someone who brings peace, not pressure. That's what independence offers. When you stop needing someone to validate your worth, you become free. And that freedom is what draws people in, not because you're trying to impress them, but because you finally learned how to live without permission. You're not chasing love, you're becoming love. And that shift, that energy, that presence, it speaks louder than any words ever could. Purpose is magnetic because it gives a man direction, clarity, and inner strength that cannot be faked or borrowed. A man with purpose moves differently. He isn't wandering through life hoping something good happens. He's building something, becoming something, moving towards something with intention. That kind of energy pulls people in without even trying. Women especially are drawn to it because it signals leadership, stability, and vision. There's nothing more attractive than someone who knows exactly what they're after and is willing to pay the price to get it. Purpose gives you depth. It separates you from the crowd. It makes you unforgettable. Most men live in reaction mode. They respond to life instead of designing it. They wait for the right time, the right woman, the right moment. But a man with purpose doesn't wait. He moves, he creates. He understands that time is short and energy is precious. His mission becomes his filter. He doesn't chase distractions. He doesn't fall into drama. He says no to anything that pulls him off track, not because he's cold, but because he's focused. That focus is rare, and rare is always valuable. Women can see the difference between a man who is driven and a man who is drifting. One inspires trust and admiration. The other fades into the background. When a man is living with purpose, everything about him aligns. His posture changes, his tone sharpens, his decisions become more deliberate. He no longer needs to convince anyone of his value because his actions speak loud enough. He doesn't chase attention, he commands it simply by doing what he was built to do. And that command presence isn't about being the loudest or the flashiest. It's about being undeniable. When you meet a man on a mission, you remember him. He doesn't need to talk about his goals, you can feel them in the way he shows up. That energy is magnetic because it represents certainty in a world full of confusion. Purpose also creates discipline. When you know where you're going, you stop wasting time on things that don't matter. You stop letting emotions run your life. You develop habits that match your ambition, and this consistency becomes part of your identity. People begin to associate you with strength, reliability, and direction. Women find this incredibly attractive because it offers something few men provide. No leverage, not control, no dominant, but presence. A man who's living with purpose doesn't need to be told how to lead. He naturally takes initiative. He naturally makes decisions. He naturally sets the pace. Without purpose, you become reactive. You chase feelings. You look for meaning in people, substances, or distractions. And women can feel that too. They feel the aimlessness. They feel the insecurity behind the words. And no matter how charming or handsome you are, nothing can compensate for the lack of direction. That's why purpose is the difference. It creates gravity, it creates mystery, it creates respect. You don't need to be rich, you don't need to be famous, but you do need to be committed to something bigger than yourself. Because when you are, you don't just walk through life, you lead it. And that's what makes you magnetic. Confidence isn't loud, it's quiet and grounded. It doesn't need to shout to be heard or put on a performance to be recognized. Your confidence is calm, steady, and deeply rooted in self-awareness. It's not about dominating a room with volume, but about influencing it with presence. Loudness often masks insecurity. Men who feel the need to brag, boast, or constantly prove themselves are usually trying to cover up the very things they fear others will see. But a man who truly knows his worth has no interest in trying to impress. He lets his actions, his posture, and his silence speak for him. When you walk into a room with quiet confidence, people notice without you needing to demand their attention. There's something magnetic about a man who isn't trying to be seen but still is. He's composed not because he's trying to be cool, but because he's at peace with who he is. That peace is what women pick up on. It creates a sense of safety and strength that makes others feel more at ease around you. You're not reactive, you don't over-explain, you're not afraid of pauses in conversation, you're comfortable in stillness because you don't need constant external input to feel valuable. Quiet confidence also means you don't shrink yourself. You don't apologize for your standards, your preferences, or your presence. You're not rude or arrogant, but you're unapologetically yourself. You don't need to argue to prove your intelligence. You don't need to be the center of attention to feel seen. You understand that your worth doesn't come from being loud, it comes from being real. Loud confidence is fragile because it relies on recognition. Quiet confidence is unshakable because it comes from internal truth. In relationships, this kind of confidence is rare and incredibly attractive. A man who is grounded doesn't panic when he's challenged. He doesn't get defensive or emotional when something doesn't go his way. He listens, he evaluates, he decides with clarity. That stability builds trust. It shows emotional maturity. It signals that he's not easily rattled, that he's not living at the mercy of other people's approval or disapproval. That's the kind of presence that makes a woman feel secure, not because he controls her, but because he controls himself. Confidence doesn't seek permission. It doesn't wait to be told it's enough. It stands firm, even when others doubt. And that kind of self-possession is magnetic. You don't have to raise your voice to make a point. You don't have to be the funniest or smartest guy in the room to be respected. You just have to be sure of yourself. And that certainty will echo louder than any words ever could. A man with quiet confidence isn't chasing validation. He's simply walking his path, focused on what matters, unshaken by noise. And in a world full of distractions, that kind of clarity stands out like a lighthouse in the dark. Presence over performance means that who you are matters far more than what you do to impress. In a world where so many people are trying to stand out by doing more, saying more, and acting more, the most magnetic person is the one who simply is. Presence is not about being passive, it's about being deeply rooted in the moment. It's the way someone can look at you and truly listen without distraction. I know it. It's the calm that fills the space when someone walks into a room with certainty, not because They're trying to be noticed, but because they're completely in tune with themselves. Performance is often tied to insecurity. When a man performs, he's trying to win approval. He's chasing laughter, attention, compliments, not because he's confident, but because he needs external feedback to feel okay. He's acting, he's adapting, he's calculating every move to get a reaction. That kind of energy may entertain for a moment, but it doesn't last. Women can see through it. What sticks with them, what leaves a lasting impression, a man who is fully present. He's not looking for the next thing to say to seem clever. He's not rehearsing lines in his head. He's right there, grounded and listening. That kind of attentiveness is rare and it's powerful. When a man is present, he doesn't need a perfect script. He doesn't rely on jokes or stories to fill silence. He's not in a rush to impress because he knows that true connection isn't built on fireworks. It's built on depth. He's aware of his surroundings, but he's not distracted by them. He holds eye contact not to dominate, but to engage. He speaks when he has something real to say, not just to keep attention. That kind of presence creates intimacy, creates trust. It makes the other person feel seen and heard, and that experience is unforgettable. Performance is exhausting, both for the one doing it and for the one watching it. You can only play a role for so long before it cracks. But presence is sustainable because it's rooted in truth. It's not about becoming someone. It's about being fully yourself. You don't have to exaggerate. You don't have to pretend. You just have to show up fully, authentically. Honestly, that kind of energy can't be taught. It has to be practiced through self-awareness, self-respect, and a willingness to drop the mask. Many men think they need to be more to get noticed, funnier, louder, smoother. But what women really crave is realness. They want to feel something that isn't rehearsed or artificial. When you show up fully present without the armor of performance, you give them that. You offer something different, something rare. You're not competing with anyone else. You're not trying to steal the spotlight. You're just being fully and confidently, and that is what leaves a mark. That is what makes people remember you long after the moment has passed, because presence lingers, performance fades. You don't chase women, you become the man worth chasing. This idea changes everything. Most men are taught to pursue, to impress, to win her over with effort. They think if they just say the right things, wear the right clothes, or play the right game, they'll get the girl. But chasing rarely works in the long term. It may get attention, but it doesn't earn respect. It doesn't build desire. Chasing communicates one thing clearly. You believe she's above you, and you're trying to catch up. It puts her on a pedestal and puts you in a position of need. That energy is not attractive. It's exhausting, and it quickly becomes obvious. Instead of chasing, focus on building. Build your body, your mind, your values, your discipline. Build a life you're proud of. Build habits that sharpen your character and goals that stretch your potential. When you do this consistently, you shift the dynamic. You stop being the one who tries to be chosen, and you become the one who chooses, not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. You know what you bring to the table, and you know what kind of woman fits into your life. That's what makes you magnetic. A man who is worth chasing doesn't need to convince anyone of his value. It's evident in how he lives. He doesn't seek approval. He doesn't depend on reactions. He's focused on his purpose, not someone's attention. That kind of focus creates gravity, it creates mystery, it creates a presence that women feel even before you say a word. They start to wonder who you are, what drives you, and why you're not desperate for attention like everyone else. That curiosity becomes attraction. When you chase, you place her at the center of your world. You start adapting to her pace, her moods, her availability. You stop leading, you start following. And once you give up your leadership, you lose your edge. But a man worth chasing leads himself first. He doesn't bend for attention. He doesn't rush into something just because it feels good in the moment. He makes decisions based on standards, not emotions. And when a woman senses that strength, she leans in, not because you asked her to, but because she wants to be near that energy. Becoming the man worth chasing isn't about manipulation or playing games. It's about becoming so whole, so driven, and so confident in yourself that love becomes a natural byproduct, not a desperate goal. It's about living in a way that inspires respect, not begging for affection. You become the type of man who doesn't chase women because he's already busy chasing greatness, and greatness is what draws people in. When you stop needing her to fill a gap in your identity, you give her space to be genuinely attracted to who you really are. That's the shift. You no longer seek to impress, you just express who you've become. You stop proving and start living. And in doing so, you no longer have to run after women. You become the man they notice, the man they respect, and the man they want to be close to. Not because you chase them, but because you become the man they hope to find. So here's the brutal truth. It's not about chasing, performing, or pretending. It's about becoming a man who respects himself, moves with quiet confidence, lives with purpose, and never begs for validation. A man who leads himself first. When you stop trying to be what you think women want and start becoming who you are meant to be, everything changes. The attention, the respect, the connection. It all flows to the man who stands firm in who he is. Not because he's trying to be irresistible, but because he already is.